Hey guys, can you hear me? Early birds get the worm. I decided to start 2 minutes early. Give me a thumbs up or let me know that you could hear me in the chat. I'm always skeptical. Hey guys, can you hear me? I just want to make sure. This is the first time I'm actually doing this chat. Okay, great, awesome. I'm going to try to block the lights from behind my head too, because I could see that that could be a little bit annoying. So let me see if I could position my big noggin. Well, thanks guys. I'm really excited to be doing this with you. It's my first live chat. I knew that YouTube was allowing for this in the past and never got around to it. So hi guys, I know you guys are all tuning in from lots of places. Mad props to the people who are like in Australia and other places because it's like 1 a.m. there. So I appreciate you guys staying up or getting up in that case. And I already shared in the text on the right-hand side, but I figured we'd do a little bit of structure. So maybe 20 minutes of Q&A. I started actually collecting some Q&A from last night's chat. And then 20 minutes to get feedback from what you've been liking about the channel, what you'd like to see, maybe some ideas. And then we could do some 10 minutes of some updates of things that I'm thinking of and getting your feedback on that. And then some final Q&As. So yeah, but everybody, I love that you're screaming in from all your countries. I know we got Malaysia and Sweden and Italy and Philippines and India and all throughout the US. And I saw some Santa Fe and some Michigan and everything else in there, London, South Africa. You guys are going to have a wealth of knowledge to share. And one of the first questions I actually gathered was last night. And I thought it was a good one because I don't know all the answers to this, but I thought we could actually think about it together. And I didn't get the name of the person who asked this, but he or she asked, what are some tropical plants that are easy to start from seeds? Now, of course, like most of you probably know that when we go to plant shops, they're not usually selling seeds of our normal houseplants. And a lot of times we like to buy houseplants that are nice and flush already. And so I don't really grow a lot of tropical or subtropical plants from seed. And I know many of you are probably from tropical areas and actually do start plants from seed. But I thought we'd actually think about this question from a more 30,000 foot approach. And if we think about tropical plants and subtropical conditions, so think about like forest conditions in the tropics. It's lush, it's green, it's damp, it's moist, it's humid, it's warm. So if you are a seed in a subtropical or tropical climate, and all of a sudden you drop down onto a substrate and it's humid and it's moist and it's damp and you have all this foliage around you, well, you, by golly, better be able to propagate very quickly, because if you don't propagate, someone else is going to fill the space. So when I think about this question of like what seeds are easy to propagate from subtropical and tropical plants, I really think that a good vast majority of them would be easy to propagate. When I'm thinking of anthurium, they have that kind of like pectinous jelly on the outside of their seeds. Oftentimes what you'll have to consider if there is something like that in a plant, you'll want to remove that substance. And sometimes that substance gets removed like through an animal's gut. So an animal might eat it like a bird and they'll poop it out on the other side and then it'll get processed. So those are the things that you might want to think about if you're, propagating, keeping the soil very, moist, a nice airflow, and then also warm. Because when you think of subtropical and tropical climates, you think of, maybe something that's 20 degrees Celsius, which if you're in Fahrenheit, that's probably more like 60 degrees, or I would say somewhere between 20 and 27 degrees Celsius. So you're talking about 60 to 86 degrees. 60 to about 80 degrees, 68 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, it's really hard for me to calculate those Celsius and Fahrenheit. I'm used to the Fahrenheit scale. but you want something that's a little bit warm, so you want to keep that substrate warm. And if you're watering that plant, you probably want to keep it warm as well. So if you're watering that seed. If I think about seeds in the temperate climate, which is where I am, I get the sense that you just have to do a little bit more work. Like you have to scarify seeds in some cases, or stratify seeds. So you have to give them a cold period, or you have to scar the outside of the seed. Or if you're thinking about some seeds that need fire in order to be able to start, you don't really have to do a lot of that kind of stuff, I would imagine, for subtropical and tropical seeds. So when you think about that, I mean, even though I don't have great experience in propagating tropical seeds, those are the things that I would probably think about just by putting yourself in a seeds position if you were out in, like, say, tropical climates. So, but anybody else who is in tropical climates who do seed starting, whether it's indoors, outdoors, or under a shade house or greenhouse, feel free to share in the chat some of the things that you enjoy growing from seed, and the person who asked that question, or the person who's interested in that question, will learn from you as well. So what they can't learn from me, they could learn from other folks. So I invite those answers in the chat. And then someone just earlier asked about growing Dixonia Antarctica. And all the Aussies who are tuning in, and maybe some people from Tasmania as well, will be familiar with their tree ferns, Dixonia Antarctica. And this is something that I have only seen growing in landscapes and growing in botanic gardens. It's not one that I've ever actually grown indoors. And I think this question, whoever asked it, was growing smaller ones. So if you're familiar with Dixonia Antarctica, it's a giant tree fern. It almost looks like a fern on a stick. And they could get really large, very, very tall. But they're understory trees. So when I think about Dixonia Antarctica, I think about them growing in maybe like disturbed forests, kind of in the gullies. So they need this really rich, fertile, moist soil. They're probably getting some moisture from the air, some humidity. If you find them in kind of drier climates, you're going to find them in like a microclimate within that drier climate. So like I said, you're going to find them kind of on the edges, in the gullies, underneath forests. One thing about Dixonia Antarctica that I'll raise is that I don't think it's endangered, but it is being harvested quite a lot. And a lot of the plants that are being harvested from Australia for the landscape market are not always well documented. So there are some pressures of tree ferns, and oftentimes they'll collect cuttings from the crowns of the tree ferns, and they'll ship them, whether they're reported or unreported. So I would just be mindful of that. One of the things in the landscape, and I've seen it actually growing in Seattle, of all places, in the northwest of the United States. When it gets a little cold, if you're growing it in a colder climate, you're going to want to protect the crown, and you're going to want to protect it with like burlap or something like that. But you want to maintain a lot of airflow with your tree ferns. So whether you're growing it in like a greenhouse, I've never grown it in a house before, or on a patio, or if in a landscape, you're going to want a lot of airflow, because they are prone to rot. So they'll get crown rot, which is, I believe, crown rot could come from both bacterial and fungal infections. So you're going to get like a lot of stagnant dampness, and you don't want that. So it's kind of that like happy medium, right, between getting airflow and getting moisture and not being too wet. So I think that would be really challenging to achieve indoors, but I could be proven wrong. Again, I've never grown a small Dixonia Antarctica. And like I said, I've only seen it in the landscape. And typically when you put them in the landscape, even if they're smaller or larger, you stake them. It's not like they have this extensive root system or whatever. You end up staking them with like wooden stakes and pounding them into the ground, essentially. It's kind of interesting and weird. But yeah, again, if you're I don't know if you're growing Dixonia antarctica from like spore. It is a fern, so it has a spore. What I would imagine is that if this is an understory tree and it's growing in kind of this moist area, that spore will need moisture in order to be able to grow up. And I would imagine that you would need to maintain that moisture because they have something called a prothallus, which is like this kind of, it's like the gametophyte generation of the Dixonia. And it will need to, it gets like this like little leafy look, but you'll need to maintain that moisture. And I think growing it from spore is a great challenge. I'm sure people at botanic gardens do it all the time, but I don't know how to do it, but I would imagine moisture is important, airflow is important, and being able to grow it up into like a little plant. That is definitely like plant ninja stuff. But yeah, I would definitely encourage it. I mean, I definitely kind of try. They are expensive trees for the landscape, and they should be, because like I said, they're being, you know, taken from the environment, and hopefully there's more sustainable harvesting. Maybe people in Australia will know and be able to chime in. I think there's more silviculture that's happening for Dixonia. But yeah. And let's see, are there any more questions? It's so hard to actually see. Okay, so somebody asks about, this is just the question that pops up right now because the questions are going really fast. Someone is asking about their Alocasia. It's growing, it has yellow leaves. All right, so yellow leaves on a plant, it's like getting a sniffly nose and saying that you have a cold. You don't know. The sniffly nose can mean so many different things, as can a yellowing leaf. So when you're looking at that yellow leaf, observe where that yellow leaf is on the plant. You know, is it down below? Is it up above? Are you getting more consecutive yellow leaves than you are getting newer green leaves? Those are all kind of important things to know. In my Houseplant Masterclass Facebook group, I noticed that somebody posted Pilia peperomioides, and they had green leaves with basically green veins with yellow around the edges. So it had interveinal chlorosis. That's what it's called, where it has like the green veins and like yellow around the edges in between the veins. And it was only on the older leaves. And that, to me, is a sign of nitrogen deficiency, most likely. And the reason for that is because nitrogen is a very mobile nutrient. And what I mean by mobile nutrient is that it could shift the nitrogen from the older leaves and put them up to the newer leaves. So the plant will know, hey, I need more nitrogen, and I might as well take them from these old guys downstairs and actually move them up to all the new foliage up above. Now, if you're getting like yellow foliage in the new growth, then you're likely have some other type of nutrient deficiency. And that could be something maybe like iron, for instance, because iron is not that mobile. So the plant can't pull from one place to the next. There could be other examples too, like magnesium and manganese and different ones like that. So I would really pay attention to that. You will also see just natural die-off of leaves depending on when you get your plant. If the plant is acclimatizing to your light, then that could be a challenge as well. Or if you have it in too high of light. So I think you said you had an Alocasia black velvet. That black velvet has really, really dark leaves. They're very thick. I wouldn't put it in like bright sunny windowsill, because if you're seeing kind of this general malaise or this yellowness kind of happening on your leaves, then it could be that the chlorophyll is actually being destroyed by some of the intense sun rays. So there's a lot of different things that it could be, and I'm not there to observe your plant, but what I'd like to kind of instill in us is maybe giving us these thought processes and these observational skills for us to be able to think about these things. I mean, everything from that first question of like, what tropical plants are good for growing seeds, or what seeds can you start with tropical plants, growing Dixonia Antarctica and yellowing leaves. Like just going through this process of elimination, kind of taking that 30,000 foot approach, I think really helps us to be able to determine what could be going on with our plants. Okay, somebody asks about the tassel fern care advice. So tassel ferns, Lycopodium, Lycopoda, they are, from what I've seen from botanic gardens and people growing tassel ferns, is the ones that I found that are most successful have water underneath them. So it kind of brings up this, as the water kind of evaporates, it gives this moisture, extra moisture in the air for the tassel ferns. And I've seen that in botanic gardens in the Netherlands. If you remember the episode of James Ippy from Singapore, he had some tassel ferns that were growing on his like little tiny balcony, and he had water underneath it. And I think he kind of just determined like they were drying out very easily. And then when he put that little pond on his balcony, that was enough moisture in the air in order to be able to help gain humidity in that atmosphere. So those things I think could be very helpful maybe for you. I don't know where you're growing your tassel fern, but I think if you get any kind of dry air, it will probably end up being crispy. But those are things that I just observed from people growing tassel ferns and tassel fern family members in botanic gardens and in homes. Okay. Where do I source my beneficial insects? Okay, so for those of you who haven't checked out my pest management playlist, do so, because I don't think beneficial insects are for everyone. They can get very expensive. And I have used beneficial insects for, oh gosh, probably almost 10 years now. But, and I use them in a very proactive measure, and I get them every like 2 to 3 weeks, you know, starting in the spring and usually ending in the fall. So I stopped. I actually didn't have as many thrips pressures or anything this year. Thrips were really bad for me last year, but not this year. So I get mine from Arbico Organics. It's ARBICO. If you're not in the United States, you're probably going to find beneficial insects elsewhere. So you'll probably have to end up sourcing them. And I've seen also in the Netherlands that you could get some beneficial insects that I can't actually even get out here. So you guys are really lucky. For example, I had some actual bad mealybug infestations on some of my plants this year. And I would have really loved to get mealybug destroyers. Those are the crypts, the larvae stage, because the beetle stage actually flies to the windows. They're very sensitive to light. So when they see light, they want to go towards the windows. And I actually don't find them to be as good of a predator as like if they're larval stage. So I can't get them, but in the Netherlands, you can get them. So you might be able to source them elsewhere, depending on what countries you're in. And you might not be able to source the same beneficial insects that I can source as well. I love green lacewings. They are a really great generalist predator, but they are native also to the United States. So I'm sure they're probably native elsewhere, but I haven't done, you know, that deep dive of research as far as that goes. But that's where I get them. And my green lacewings, I get them not in pill bottles. I get them in the kind of cardboard with like the little separate rooms. And it's simply because the green lacewings are cannibals. And if they're hungry, they will eat each other. So they're pretty ferocious. So, and anyway, at the end of the day, the biggest green lacewing wins. So if you want to go there, you could do a little bit more research. But be mindful that it's the cost of the shipping that really costs a lot of money to get those bugs over to you. So you have to figure out whether that is something that you really want to invest in. And if you have enough plants to be able to justify that cost, for instance. All right. How much light does a Peperomia Deliberformis need? So Peperomia Deliberformis is one of those succulent peperomias, and they have a taco-shaped leaf with a little window vein on top of it. And I love those I love succulent peperomias. Those are designed to be able to take some intensity of light. And the reason why the plants are shaped that way, little taco shape with that little window, if you remember from my Peperomia care video, I explained, basically why that window is very similar to lithops, is it helps regulate the light, and it basically shatters the light in various different directions in the leaf so that it protects the leaf from being overheated or destroying the chlorophyll. So I'm personally right now growing mine under a fluorescent light. It's about, I'm looking at it right now, it's probably about 3 or 4 inches below the fluorescent light, grow light. I also have my Peperomia fair array there. So if you're familiar with that, that's like, has a little bit of a longer leaf. It's also often called Peperomia green beans, I think, and maybe Peperomia nevada could be some common names for it. But a lot of those succulent peperomias grow in mountainous areas in higher altitudes in like around the Andes. So a lot of those plants that have that kind of similar look will require less moisture and could handle a little bit more light intensity. I think if you give it too much light, I had one in my southwest facing windows, and it did end up getting spider mites afterwards. So I think it was just too much intense light all the time. So I would just be a little bit more mindful of that. But again, that's kind of my experience. I find that it's much easier to grow under a standard grow light, and I have my grow light on for about 12 hours every day. So let's see, what time? Okay, we are right on time. So let's change up. I'll go back to Q&A at the end. But I'd love to hear from you about just feedback for the channel. Like what have you liked over the years? I mean, I've been doing this now for about 3.5 years. And I could see on my end, from like analytics and all this other kind of stuff. Oh, hey, Joey, look at that. My friend Joey from Ethiopia, he's in Ethiopia, who I take care of his plants when he's gone, which he has very little plants left. Okay, he's like an herb used in coffee whose name is Ruta chilepensis, common in North Africa. Can it survive if we grow it in New York? I would have to look up that herb, Joey, but if you take a cutting and you're able to get it on the plane, remember, like, plants are like drugs and guns. It's very hard to get them on the plane. But if you get seeds, we could probably grow them, I would imagine. So, okay, some folks are saying 365 days of plants might kill me. Yeah, that was a really big undertaking. I don't know if people really enjoyed it on the channel too, because if you got notifications on my channel and you click notifications, you get an email every day, every time the videos come up. On a weekly basis, it's a little bit better. It's kind of like a little missive in your inbox, and you're like, oh, okay, great, a new video. But with 365 days of plants, it's like videos all the time. So, but maybe if I get a second wind, I might consider it. Some people said the ASMR. I don't think a lot of people like the ASMR on my channel. It's kind of a very selective group of folks. We get a lot of votes for 365 days of plants. Or unless it's like the same person typing it over again, 365, 365. Field trips, a closet tour. Yeah, my closet changes up quite often. So for those of you who don't know or haven't seen some of my tours, I converted, oh, this was like many years ago. I converted my closet into a garden. It's not like that fancy or anything like that, but I have to say I originally got the idea from a magazine who's probably no longer in business, but the magazine wanted to convert a couple people's homes, their closets, into gardens. And this was like, I want to say this was like 10 years ago now, probably. And I really was excited for that idea, and I got my closet ready, and the magazine ended up pulling out on the idea. And then so it took me about a year later to actually convert it myself, because I was like, oh, that's such a great idea. And I documented a little bit of that journey on my blog at Homestead Brooklyn, but I have never done a video on it. But you'll see it as part of like the tours. Some people are like, ew, no more ASMR. See, it's very contentious. It's like it either falls on one side or the other. I do have to say that I am really not afraid to try things. Anything that's kind of interesting, and just kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think that's what's really wonderful about the channel, is that you could do some stuff. Somebody says, make a video in Hawaii. I had plans actually to go out to Hawaii and do some videos out there, but I think with the pandemic, it just has thrown everything kilter. I mean, I had ideas for, more houseplant home tours. I still have a couple more that are coming out, but it's very hard. Field trips, houseplant home tours, everything is like kind of put on hold on that side because of the pandemic, as you know. By the way, how are you guys all doing in midst of the pandemic? I mean, we're all in different countries and all in different places. There's all different policies out there. I know we're all happy-go-lucky with all our plants, but are you guys all doing okay and hanging in there? How's the Philippines doing with the pandemic? Is stuff out going crazy out there or no? And then what about Australia and everything? I haven't heard any of that. Yeah, some people said love the houseplant home tours. Juniper has mentioned family and genus care. So I think what I just did, by the way, for playlists, Juniper, is I just created a playlist called Houseplant Care Guides. It's very hard to find. When you start producing so many videos, it's so hard to actually find those videos on the channel. Like, there's just hundreds of them. So I actually organized the videos on my blog at homesteadbrooklyn.com, and then you could go onto the YouTube channel there and actually, it's really organized and you could search. But I also created a playlist called Houseplant Care Guides. So I'm starting to actually create more of those. So I have like the Marantacea up there. So that's the prayer plants. So that's like the Japortias and the Calatheas and the Marantas. Peperomia, Anthurium I just did, Ripsalis. There's a couple others that you could find there. So I'm actually going to be doing more care guides, because the 365 days of plants, which you guys all loved, those were very, surface level, quick 5 minutes. I really want to be able to do a little bit more in-depth care guides. So those will fall into those playlists. So definitely look that up on the playlist guides, and you'll be able to find some stuff there. Like, I had somebody ask about like Ripsalis care, and I was like, here you go, here's that video. So it's there. And Hoya scouting. Oh, yes. So somebody says in Malaysia, they've just discovered that their area has a ton of Hoya. And yes, Hoyas that's kind of like that Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, that whole area is like ripe with Hoya. So, it's so funny because we're always attracted to the exotic plant, right? And what's exotic for us here might not be exotic for somebody else. But I think what I hope Plant One On Me really inspires you is to really relook at all your plants in your native habitats and find out what's so lovely about them. And I love that even too in my own native habitat, like in the temperate climate world. You could just discover so many beautiful species that are out there that you might not be able to grow indoors, but that are just absolutely stunning if you start to really look at them. So what other ideas for the channels do you have that you really liked. I saw field trips, houseplant home tours, all these things that were like pre-pandemic, very easy to do. 365 days of plants I'm still recovering from. Oh yeah, somebody says the vivarium. I still haven't gotten around to actually like cutting down my biopod, my vivarium, but I really do need to get around to that. I'm also, you probably can't see it, but my green wall in the back, I'm starting to clean that out. So every year I have to clean out my green wall, but it's such a slow process for me at this stage. It's not like I'm doing it all in one day. So it's just gradual. It's like what I could handle it at that one time. So Renee says 365 days of plants was so helpful whenever they got a new plant, which is really wonderful. People really love the Thailand tours, which is fantastic because I did spend quite a bit of time out in Thailand. That's another thing that you could search for on the playlist. So I've created playlists where you could look for Sweden and Singapore and Thailand and all the different places. Netherlands, I believe, is in there, so you could actually search for that. Alpine plants and orchids, that was really wonderful. Oh, hi, My Clean Leaves. That's really nice to see you, and thanks for the little little dibs on the side. So she says the repot videos are so therapeutic. If you haven't heard, My Clean Leaves also does a YouTube channel. There's so many great plant YouTubers out there. I barely can keep up, but it's just really wonderful. Like so many folks, good folks. And I met My Clean Leaves out in one of the book tours, so that's really wonderful. Some people are saying chicken care, which is interesting because yeah, all the chickens I post on my Instagram, you know, and I used to have Kippy, of course. Her anniversary of when she died is actually coming up, so it's really, you know, sad. November 4th is when she passed. Anything else? So any other ideas before we move on to the next section of stuff that you think would be really good? Oh, somebody said, wish you came back from a plant swap in LA. Yeah, I know. The plant swaps, when they're not in my neighborhood, are a lot more challenging in order to be able to do because I don't have the same relationships that I have in New York that I do in other places. So with that, we were really able to actually pull that one together in LA because of, I have to say, Health Aid. Health Aid was able to front some of the costs of that because we were not able to get the place for free. Typically, people will usually donate their space and then we're able to raise that money for nonprofits. And with the plant swaps, we were able to raise around $8,000 across all the plant swaps that we did. And I'm sure other people were raising money with their plant swaps as well. And yeah, so that was something that I was able to do because of a lot of the partners. Some folks said deeper explanations of scientific names and plants, like history and meaning, as a basic understanding of Latin nomenclature is very useful. I think I definitely have that one on my list of things to do. I think that's a really excellent piece of information for Noah. Thank you for mentioning that. Show us your wardrobe. Well, I can show you what I'm wearing now. It's just overalls. It's overalls in this, but yeah, my closet's pretty clean. I can't take you over there. I have my hard drives all attached to this this thing. I won't be doing a tour at this stage, but yeah, herb gardens and stuff like that. Where I get my jackets from? Well, you guys are all like, I almost like need to start a whole different fashion section. No, most of my clothes I actually get. I have got most of the clothes that I've gotten from like 10 years ago. I just have like a very extensive wardrobe from what I got 10 years ago. But when I do get new wardrobe, I really, really, really love to support my local designers. So there's 2 designers on my street that are still around from the pandemic that are Japanese designers. And I really love quality and workmanship and just high quality materials. And I'm that type of person who will just buy a very nice piece of wardrobe or garment and just have it for the rest of my life. And I want to be able to wear it until it's absolutely threadbare. My number one thing that I hate is when I get an article of clothing with a button and the button falls off like the next day later. That is like the most annoying thing ever. Just like learn how to sew a button. So sometimes I will go into garments and I'll like pull on the button and make sure that they're really well sewed on. If you're buying online, it's a little harder to do. But I like overalls. I like knitted things. I like just really well made, crafted, tailored things. And so I like to be able to support local designers as well. So thank you so much for your feedback for the channel. I think I could save all of this chat later so I could go back through the chat and see other things that I've missed along the way. Plant light experiments. I saw that one. A lot of the texting that's going through is happening so fast I could barely read it. So I want to give you some updates on my end and tell you what I'm thinking. And I'd love to hear your feedback because I'm actually thinking of starting a second channel. So what do you think about that? Because I would love to do more outdoor gardening. Outdoor gardening, maybe herbal stuff, that kind of stuff. And I don't think putting it on Plant One On Me seems appropriate because this is more houseplants and it's more indoor. And so the chicken channel, if it was more outdoor stuff, that would probably involve like chickens on that channel and more things along those lines. So I have done some outdoor gardening things. And if you remember some of the, planting mushrooms outside and all this other kind of stuff, you can plant mushrooms, spreading mushrooms outside. But it just doesn't, I just don't feel like fits on this current channel. And I don't think people go to my channel in order to be able to watch that kind of outdoor gardening stuff. So I kind of get a sense that maybe some of you would come over to that channel, but not all of you. And so I would love to get your thoughts on that. Somebody said, call it Plant Two On Me. Yeah. Or like if it's, where in the world, is it Sweden where you kiss 3 times or the Netherlands? Plant 3 on me. I guess it really depends on where I'm going to be filming it. Yeah. And I mean, do some of you have outdoor gardening areas? I mean, the thing that's going to be challenging is that I'm in the Northeast. So if I'm doing some different kinds of like plantings outside, I'm in the Northeast United States, obviously. So, and so my climate is as such where I'm in a zone that doesn't necessarily involve like planting subtropical and tropical plants in the actual environment, unless you take those tropical plants inside. But if I were, to do like in the greenhouse or something like that, which I don't have a greenhouse, but theoretically, can you actually, do some of that type of stuff? So I don't know if it would appeal to everybody or might appeal to a specific audience. So, so have outdoor, but soil is crap. Well, I mean, that's kind of some of the things that we could do, right? We could say, well, how do we rebuild our soil? How do we understand our soil? I know like some people don't think soil is sexy, but I actually think soil is a really interesting topic. And one of my favorite videos that I actually did on the channel is one that really didn't perform very well if you were looking at it from just a perspective of views or like how long people viewed it. And I loved like this video that I did on soil art and actually being able to test your soil. But I think like a lot of people who are doing indoor plants like don't do that kind of stuff. So for those of us who have both indoor and outdoor environments, I thought maybe that could be kind of interesting. And I don't know, it's just a thought that I've been kind of like mulling over. Yes, I agree. Some people said, yes, soil is very sexy. I agree. I think that people should really get into their soil because, a lot of our potting mediums indoors is sterile potting mediums, but like the soil outdoors is much more complex and interesting. And so I think we could get really nerdy with that kind of stuff. And honestly, for me, you know, my plants indoors always, and I said this in my book, How to Make a Plant Love You, it totally reminds me to like get outdoors and get my hands in soil and just get a little dirty. And just this past week, I was out there kind of building the chicken coop at the senior center, and we were like laying down the floor to prevent the rats from coming in. And the coop is so nice, and it was just like really wonderful to get the volunteers there, and you know, getting more of a better concept of being able to build the chicken coop, getting your hands dirty in the garden around the chicken coop, laying down the compost, you know, rebuilding soil, seeing really, you know, the smell of like really good soil and compost. I mean, I think it's just like so fun, and that you could spread anywhere. It doesn't matter what climate you're in. Good soil is good soil, and a lot of those same principles will hold no matter where you are in the world, because I am aware that, you know, this is a very international audience. And so when I think about it, I think about like, how will this apply to people all over the world? And I think ways that maybe it will apply to people all over the world is also just like philosophical, just the way that you think. So I think that could be interesting. So we'll see. Somebody asked, what's wrong with my nail? So if you've seen my thumbnail, it's a little weird. Somebody says, what's wrong with your nail? So when I show my fingers, when I'm like holding a plant or something, if I'm holding a plant or whatever, you could really see my fingers. My thumb, I was born with a congenital kind of defect. I don't know if you could call it a defect, but it has a ridge along the line of the nail. And I think it's actually because I was a compulsive thumb sucker. Even in the womb with my mother, in the womb, every time they did an ultrasound, I had my thumb in my mouth like this. And I think what happened is it actually destroyed my nail bed underneath, and it created this ridge. And then around the 4th grade, I started to develop OCD because of my teacher. My teacher had OCD, habit tic. It's called habit tic deformity, where she would chew on her fingers. And I was always the good kid in class, and they made me sit up front to separate all the bad kids in class. And I sat right in front of her as she would like chew on her hands. And I was like, oh, I never want to do that. And then after the 4th grade, I developed that compulsion. And so I have a habit tic deformity now. So whenever I'm reading, I unconsciously actually pick on my thumbnail, on my thumb. But I had always, when I was born, I had this kind of ridge along the line of my thumb. And I think it was because of, it was thumb sucking. I don't know if you had any hands up if you were thumb suckers when you were a kid. So yeah, it was, I think thumb sucking was just a thing that I did like in the womb of my mother. It just felt so nice. But yeah, so I have a little ridge around my thumb. And I guess it can actually get better, but, you know, I have to like probably wear like rubber bands or something around my thumbnails, but it's only the thumbs that I end up doing it to. So it's like one of those things that's kind of a weird OCD type of thing that people get. So yeah, it's funny. So anyway, so any more feedback on the channel that you'd like to see, or on the potential of doing a new channel, one focused mainly on outdoor stuff, or no? Somebody asks, how many Filipino plant species do you have in your collection? I have no idea. I have no idea how many I have in my collection. I haven't done that kind of level of research. And, you know, I think with everybody, your plant collection is always changing. I have started to get into aloes a lot recently. So people from South Africa, the folks from South Africa who are kind of tuning in, they're probably like, yay, because there's a lot of aloes in South Africa. And I just think they're like really fantastic. I just bought, I was in upstate New York and just bought a seed grown aloe that was so beautiful. You might have seen it from my Instagram. I was wearing it like a mustache. And there's a few others. So like my closet garden, I've actually like brought a lot of my aloes, and I'm growing a lot more aloes in my closet garden. So things always change. You know, you do. And like, I can't find my Hoffmannia anymore. I had my Hoffmannia growing in my biopod and my vivarium, my paludarium. I can't find that thing anymore. It's like under a pile of weeds. So yeah, it's funny. Okay, so Marco says, more planters, more pots. Yes, I had my favorite planters in there, so you'll be able to see that. And also 365 days of plants. That was another great reason to do it, is that you could see how I kind of paired planters with pots, which is really good. So someone asked, like, can you explain how we know if a plant actually exists in the wild and is not variegation? So some different types of plants are naturally variegated. So if you think about some of the plants behind me, Aglaonemas, they develop natural variegation that is caused by, you know, if you think about a leaf, it's really thin, but there's many different layers within the leaf, right? And some of those layers have air pockets. And when you have an air pocket in between the different colors of the leaf, you actually get a different type of variegation. And then there's other plants like snake plants, those formerly known as Sansevieria, the Dracaenas, that actually become chimeras, and they just develop variegation very easily. So that's why you have so many different types of trifasciatas, right? You know, they have so many different types of variegation. Sometimes you get the yellows on the edging, sometimes you get stripes in the middle, and you could develop different clonal varieties of those that's developed that variegation. And you'll see some of that variegation in the wild, and sometimes it won't always hold. So you have to just keep on selecting for that variegation within a plant. And if you have, if you've seen one of my earlier videos that I did with Darren from Steve's Leaves, there is one on the Monstera deliciosa, and I think the Syngonium, and how you could actually select for variegation within your plants if the plant is already variegated. So you could tell from the stem or the petiole whether that is going to be a variegated leaf, even if it hasn't unfurled yet. So that's like a very vintage, you know, video that I did from way, way long time ago that you might be able to find and on the channel. And you probably just look on the channel and search for variegation. I thought that was a really interesting one that we did very early on, so that you could do that. Someone asks to show my snake plant collection. I will be doing that one. That is a video that I will do. I have to like pull all my snake plants together in one place. I think that would be a really interesting one. So I don't know if you watched the why Sansevieria has been classified into Dracaena, but I think that there's a lot of fascinating research that's going on right now with snake plants that can be very revealing, phylogenetically speaking, and what their place is within kind of like the whole group of Dracaena and the genus Dracaena, and when they broke off from Dracaena and who's related to who. And just because it has a specific shape, it doesn't mean that it's more closely related to the one with the same shape. So there's a lot of like fascinating, like nerdy stuff when it comes to snake plants, and there's a lot of cool things I think that we could do with them too. So that will definitely be like one of the episodes, and I might just turn that into one of those care guides. So like I said earlier on, for those of you who are tuning in just now, I've created playlists. Playlists are like one of those ways that I could start to put all the videos together to make it easier for you to actually find older videos and videos grouped together. So I have houseplant care guides now as a playlist. And as I do more extensive care guides for plants, I'm going to drop them into that playlist. and it's going to be a little bit easier for you to be able to do that. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more like quick one and done, you could probably go to 365 Days of Plants. And if you want something that's a little bit more extensive and goes a little bit more into the science and the nerdy stuff and all that, good stuff that most people will probably glaze over, I'll do it anyway. I'll put that into the houseplant care guides. And again, you could go into the playlist and you could find all the house tours, and you could find all the makeovers, and you could find the different countries that we've gone to. You could find one on biophilic design. So people who are using kind of green design into the architecture. We did a lot of that when we were in Singapore, but also like in Seattle. And so we've kind of put that into its own playlist. And yeah, some people are like, visit India. I know I had a lot of the Filipinos who were saying like, please visit the Philippines. I had a lot of travel plans, kind of planned out, but unfortunately it just didn't happen this year. So it's the pandemic really threw us for a loop. So fingers crossed that 2021 is better. And like right now we're going through this like crazy election here in the States. And so yeah, it's like one of those really crazy things. Questions, so many questions coming in all at once. One is on a cultivar. What is a cultivar? So a cultivar stands for cultivated variety. And a cultivated variety of plant is a plant that is selected by a human and cultivated by a human and chosen for those specific traits. So you can't get a cultivated variety in the wild, but you can select from a wild type and then cultivate it in like a greenhouse, and then keep on selecting for that specific trait, which is usually like a color trait, or it could be a disease resistance. So for instance, if you look at lilacs, like one of my favorite kind of shrubby trees outdoors, a lot of them are being selected for not having prone to downy mildew, because some of them are powdery mildew. Some of the plants are really prone to downy or powdery mildew. And so they might cultivate a specific variety that tends to have a little bit more disease resistance. Or if you have Aglaonema, for instance, because we mentioned Aglaonema before, or snake plants, you will have a cultivated variety. So typically when it's written out in scientific nomenclature, you'd have Aglaonema and it would be italicized, and then in the cultivar it would be one parentheses and the name of the cultivar. So Aglaonema chocolate would be the cultivar name, and chocolate would be in parentheses, but not two parentheses, just one. And the C of the chocolate would be capitalized. Now you might actually see old cultivar names that are Latinized. So it'll have like kind of a Latin, kind of flair to it. And that's no longer valid anymore. So those are kind of grandfathered in. If you're going to do a cultivar, you're going to have to do it in a modern language, not old school Latin language. So that's why chocolate it's in English, it's in a modern language. So, or that, that crazy one, Geometrasans, Myrtillocactus geometrasans fukuruku boyanyuku, the booby cactus. That's going to be in a more modern language. It's not going to be in a Latin language. So I don't know. Hope that helps with like the idea of a cultivar. I think it'll be worthwhile. I know I go into it a little bit more into the masterclass, in the Houseplant Masterclass. I kind of go through a little bit more of how the structure of plants are when you talk about like kingdom and phylum and class and genus, family and genus, species, and then you go into forms and variants and all that kind of stuff. It can be very confusing. And if you're in botanical circles, they treat it a little bit differently than if you're in horticultural circles. And horticulturists are usually a little bit more easygoing when it comes to plant speak. So yeah. Someone suggests a plant rehab series. I mean, all these are really good. I hope, I haven't done a live stream before, but do you guys know that if it keeps the live chat and when I post this afterwards, it'd be really good to know, because it would be great if I could go back through and I could actually see people's questions, since I will develop epilepsy if I keep on getting all these flashes on the right-hand side. Which birds are you getting at your feeders? Well, it's a really good question. Mostly pigeons here in the city. I have house sparrows and house finches, which are both not native birds. I actually thought the house finches were purple finches, but they're not. They're house finches. And we got this crazy green parrot the other day. We have like these parrots that escaped out of JFK from Argentina, and they've naturalized here in Brooklyn, out of all places. And that was at my feeder. And a kestrel, which is a bird that preys. It's a small raptor that preys on other little birds. So I don't really love seeing the kestrel at my feeder, because my feeder becomes a place where it could eat. But, you know, those guys have to eat too. And the chickens that I take care of, there's 6 of them still. Canella, Cleo, Einstein, Cappuccino, Lincoln, and Vita. And they are at the senior center, and I go there 3 times a day. So if you ever see me in the neighborhood, I'm always like have hay in my hair and I always have like sweatpants on and everything. So if you see that, I'm going to the chicken coop. I have my rain boots on because it can get pretty dirty back there. And so I go there 3 times a day. I let them out in the morning. And I try to wake up before the chickens and get there so I could help them down off their roosts, because when they fly down and they land on the ground, I know it's a little hard on their feet and they have bumblefoot. So I like to try to get there before they do, and then I help them down off their roost. But yeah, they're great. And it really is like a wonderful thing to be able to have that in the city. I just, I miss it. I miss it in the country. So somebody asks, on the cultivar front, is cultivar and hybrid synonymous? They can be, but they're not. It's not synonymous. Like you could, so say for instance, you have, say these are the same species, same in the same genus. So this is Gasteria A and this is Gasteria B, and you purposely hybridize them, and then you get Gasteria C, and that's a hybrid. And you say, wow, Gasteria C is super cool. I want to cultivate this. And then you turn Gasteria C into a cultivar, and you name it Gasteria Blue. I couldn't even think of anything interesting. And Gasteria Blue is a hybrid of these 2 Gasteria, but it's now also a cultivar because you're cultivating it and you're turning it into, and then now you're going to get a patent on it. And you're going to say, yeah, I use these 2 plants, Gasteria A and Gasteria B, to create Gasteria Blue. And so this happens to be a hybrid, and it's also now a cultivar. So in that sense, it's synonymous. But you could hybridize plants all the time and never turn them into like, and never cultivate them and turn them into a cultivar. Or plants will naturally hybridize in the wild. But if you're not going to cultivate them and turn them into commercial production, then they probably won't ever become like a cultivated variety of plant. So yeah, it's a little crazy. Someone asks about a podcast. No, I'm sorry. It's like the amount of work that goes into the YouTube channel, and even thinking about maybe even doing a second YouTube channel, I have to kind of check my sanity. Because it's just a lot of work. I think that you have to be conscious of like the efforts that you end up putting in, where you want to fit on the balance spectrum. And, and you guys probably feel this way too about your own lives, but you're like, do I have to like work this hard? Like, do I always have to like do this? And I definitely get a bout of workaholism. And that's challenging. You need to be able to step away. That's why I'm like so grateful that I have the chickens and also the plants and getting outdoors and all this kind of stuff, and doing a little bit more traveling upstate and like seeing my dad and all that other kind of stuff, it just helps to like really balance it. And I think if I were to do like, for instance, like another channel, like I'd have to really think about it from that standpoint of like being able to balance it. And, you know, I'm so grateful and lucky to have someone like Sonder who helps out on the channel now and again, and his dedication to it as well, because, you know, he's far above like my pay grade in order to be able to get some of his services like he does. He provides and is able to give me a decent, you know, decent rate at these things to be able to help out on that. So all of this kind of stuff is really good. It would be hard for me to do another form of media very well, and I'd like to be able to do things well. You know, I really value quality myself. Like if I watch content, I really like to watch quality content. I don't watch it just for entertainment value. Usually I like to get educated. So for me, that's kind of the same kind of content that I like to produce, is something that's somewhat entertaining, hopefully, and but also very educational, because it's like when you watch it, you feel like you could actually go and do something afterwards, that you've like learned something enough that you could actually then apply it to your life. Because I think what we get stuck into, if it's just like for entertainment value, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but like if it's just for entertainment value, then you're getting stuck into someone else's life and you're not living your own life. So it's really wonderful to be able to learn from somebody and then be able to apply it to your life, so you could go out and like live your own life. And I really like that. You know, that's the kind of content that I like for myself and all that other kind of stuff. So if I were to end up doing like another thing, like a podcast, and it's a different genre, I'd have to figure out like how to handle it and multitask it. Like even with 365 Days of Plants, I had to set it up first in a way so I knew I wasn't going to be like struggling with it and then like suffering at like episode 89 and not feeling like I could actually accomplish it. So I had to like develop the workflow for that. So I wouldn't say like totally no to a podcast, but like I just can't wrap my head around it now, especially if I'm thinking about doing a second channel. Anyway, well, thank you, Blue Heart Box. I forgot that you could actually donate here, which is so cool. So thank you guys for donating to this chat. I guess there's like a little super chat. You could like have a little donate box. Very helpful. Yeah, and if you guys, you know, want to be able to help the channel more, I have a sustaining membership as well. You can become a sustaining member, which is like a monthly or yearly donation. Or if you guys enrolled in the masterclass or Houseplant Basics or any of that kind of stuff, that actually really helps. I think anybody who's on here, I know Pam's Plants and My Clean Leaves was on here as well. You probably know, if you're doing your own channel, it's really hard to make money off of YouTube. You know, it's even if you get like a banger, like a video that, you know, everybody watches, oftentimes the amount of effort and the resources, at least I could speak for myself, but the amount of time and effort and resources, or the time that you're spending there actually editing it, takes a heck of a lot longer. Like if you know how to value your time and you say, oh, I would pay myself X amount per hour, and then you count up all the hours that you've spent on something. This is for anybody, not just for a YouTuber or anything like that. Then you would know what that value is of that. And I think that's always something that I always try to look at. So if I even am looking at like buying a course or buying a book or whatever, I think about it it's like, okay, how long would it take me to actually research this information? And if you pay yourself $20 an hour, let's say, or $10 an hour, wherever you are in the world, would you be able to get that research within a smaller period of time for a cheaper price than buying that like course, for instance, or that book or whatever you're buying? And if the answer is like no, then you probably should just go buy that course, because you have to value your time and put a value on your time. And I think that's how I like look at things. But when I look at things with YouTube, I really value my time, but it is really hard to actually, like, even with like Google ads and all that other kind of stuff, it's challenging, especially if you travel. Like when we were going to like Singapore or Thailand or anything like those trips aren't sponsored. Those aren't like sponsored by a business or a company or anything like that. You have to pay for yourself, and you're paying for room and board and all that other kind of stuff. And we're not staying at hostels, but like I want to stay in somewhere that's nice enough, but it doesn't have to be super fancy. But yeah, it ends up costing a lot of times. And then times you're over there, you're not working and doing your work at home. So it's one of those things that it's a cost benefit analysis all the time. So when I look at this kind of stuff and people send me great ideas of like places that I would love to travel to and do, I always try to pair my travel with something I'm already doing, or if I'm supposed to be out in that area. So for instance, when I went out to Singapore, I went out there to actually finish the last bit of my book for research that I wanted to do for how to make a plant love you. And so even though I paid for myself to go out there, I felt like it was a really critical part of my book to be able to add that rest of that story. And while I was out there, I was like, well, I flew all this way out here in Asia. Why don't we go to different places in order to be able to film? And then that was really good. So I try to be economical when it comes to planning trips and doing all this kind of stuff. And I know that that's a lot of the stuff that you don't see behind the scenes, but you really have to make some of those decisions, especially because, like, you know, YouTube's not it's not like a network. The network it's not like a Netflix or an NBC or ABC or whatever it is, and they're not sponsoring you to do those things. So I think all the YouTubers who are on here who can appreciate that when you actually support the people that you watch, you're really directly supporting them in a way that they typically don't get. So anyway, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys. Appreciate you staying up or waking up early or whatever time frames it is. I'm going to get on with my day because in about an hour, I'm going to go check on those chickens. But thank you guys. I think we should probably do this like once a month. I think you guys had a lot of great questions, and I'm going to try to go through the chat afterwards if possible and see if I could find more questions and maybe even turn them into episodes. So thank you. Carnivorous plants, I see that coming through. I have some really good carnivorous plant episodes. I have like 4 or 5 that I could think off the top of my head. So if you go back old school style to carnivorous plants, there's a couple that I did in Netherlands, and there's also I did some really cool tours with Dominic, who does Nepenthes and Drosera and Sundews and stuff like that. So you could check out some of those episodes, old school episodes. All right, guys, bye. Take care.